I can't tell you how flattered I am you let us in the hall, the fire hall today. This is where I got my political start. Not a joke. I've been chairman of the Congressional Fire Caucus, one of the folks who helped found it, and I got my start in the fire hall. We have an expression in Delaware that I was credited with coining in 1972 when I was a 29-year-old kid. I said there are three political parties in Delaware: Republicans, Democrats, and firefighters. And if you think I'm joking, and if I only get to choose one, I know which one I'd choose: the firefighters. Firefighters in my state are all professional. We're very proud. We think we have, as every state thinks they have, the most professional fire service in the country. We all brag about that in our own states, both paid and volunteer. And ladies and gentlemen, I also want to thank the state representative. Now I'm going to mispronounce your name, Chris. Sinicki. All right, you can call me Bidden if you want. It's okay, Chris. You can call me Joe Bidden. Just as long as we both spell it right, we go in the booth, right? Thank you. Oh, thank you. And Jeff Plaley, I want to thank you, Senator Plaley, for being here. It's a big deal for us. And look, I also want to thank the governor for sending a guy who comes before Washington to testify. This the only guy who, you know, Frank Busalaki is a guy who understands about rail service. And Frank, I promise you, when we get elected, you're going to have passenger rail coming through the Midwest like it never came before. I'm serious. It's coming. It's coming. So, folks, look, you know, I'm a little concerned today. You know, we badly need Wisconsin. I was on a call this morning with the national campaign folks, which we do every morning, and they didn't know I was on the call, and I heard Ryan Braun's name being mentioned, and there was a suggestion made that maybe they wanted to know whether the Constitution allows you to change vice presidents at the very end here. You know, didn't you all dream of when you were a kid, a walk-off grand slam in the playoffs? God almighty, 10th inning? Whoa, man, oh man. I tell you what, I'd be willing to let him be vice president if he'd let me take credit for that grand slam, I tell you. My Lord, you all must be ready today. Cubbies are in town? Yeah, okay. Well, I wish you all a lot of luck, man. I tell you, what I wanted to do is not sign autographs on the back of pieces of paper. I was looking to sign autographs on baseballs. It never got that far, though, for me. Ladies and gentlemen, let me say that a couple things. Number one, Jill is right. Some of you who've been to the National Fire Caucus dinner, you've heard me say it before, and the great support I've gotten from the IAFF and we have gotten in the endorsement, which is a big, big deal. They've heard me say it. But it may bear repeating. Sometimes you support a group of people, you support an endeavor because you intellectually know it's important to do it. And sometimes it's kind of in your gut that it's the right thing to do. But our support of firefighters is, which has been with me my entire career when I was a county councilman straight through my years in the Senate, comes from personal experience. You know, not only did the things happen that Jill mentioned, but when I was a young guy, I just got elected to the Senate in a tractor trailer, and I don't know, I'm not ascribing blame, in an intersection, ended up broadsiding my wife, killed my wife and daughter. My two sons were pinned in that car for a long time, and my fire company with the Jaws of Life saved both my sons. They're alive and well today because of my fire company. And if you think I'm being parochial saying my fire company, I believe it's my fire company. And then not too many years later, when I was struck with a couple what they call cranial aneurysms, where I had a bleed and I had to get in the middle of a snowstorm down to a neurosurgeon 2.5 hours away, they couldn't fly me. The helicopters didn't work. So they asked in the hospital where, because I was going to this particular doctor, and they said, what do you want me to do? And I said, call my fire company. We call my fire company, Mill Creek. We call them. And the EMT guys got me down in the middle of a snowstorm. And I got on the table in a 9-hour operation. As I got on the table, the aneurysm burst. Had they been 10 minutes later, had they been 10 minutes detoured, I'd be a dead man. And that's no exaggeration. That's literally true. There's that old joke you guys remind me of, you firefighters. There's that old joke they tell about Claude and Maud sitting out on the front step of their stoop of their house on their rocking chairs. And Claude looks at Maud, and they're both in their 90s. And Claude says, Maud, remember the time when we were dating and I went off to WW1 and I came back and I was gassed and you helped nurse me back to health. She said, yeah. He said, remember the time when we got married in 22, and then he said, we bought the farm, and then the depression hit, we lost everything. And you were there. She said, yeah. He said, they don't remember we fought back in the, in the early 40s, we finally got that drugstore, and things are going well, and then the recession hit and we lost it. He said, yeah. And he said, remember, Maud, when I was sitting on this very porch about 18 years ago, and I had that heart attack, and you were there. And she said, yeah. He said, Maud, I was thinking, you're bad luck. Well, every single important thing in my life, the firefighters have been there. Every crisis in my life, not a joke, every crisis in my life, you've been there. So I'm not sure either you're bad luck or you saved my leg. But it's real. And by the way, the reason I tell you the story is that, there are tens of thousands of people, millions of people in this country who you've saved. I mean, literally saved. And you guys and women do your job, and you never ask for anything. You never ask for any credit because that's your job. You just go and you do your job. But every single day you do your job, every single day it occurs, there's tens of thousands of people who benefit. And it's amazing how quickly we forget. After 9/11, I was the first United States Senator in Afghanistan. And I spent, we had just opened the embassy. We had just defeated the Taliban. I was at Bagram Air Force Base, and then spent time in a bunker underneath the embassy with a total of 89, 90 young Marines. And I was there, I don't know how many days, 4, 5, 6 days. And as I was about to leave, I was down at Bagram Air Force Base, and there was this bombed out hangar that the Soviets had built when they occupied Afghanistan. And it was a big old Quonset kind of hangar, but it could house a C-130. It was big. But there were holes in the roof, and it was kind of banged up. And so the commander, who was the guy who was part of Black Hawk Down, if you saw the movie, he was the operating commander in Bagram at the time. And he took me to show me what I can now say was classified at the time, the holding area where they had a group of several hundred al-Qaeda prisoners that they had captured. And so he takes me into this hangar, and this great big hangar on the floors, it looked like parking spots that had been painted on a parking lot, big rectangles. And each of them were supposedly a virtual cell for each of the prisoners. And they had cots, and they had mats and blankets. They were warm. They had food and water. They had clothing. And they were divided into 4 sections. And one of them was carved on one section, remember the towers, another remember Pennsylvania, remember the Pentagon. But they only had one photograph. Only one photograph, these Marines. They had one photograph in this bombed out hangar. And as you walked in the hangar, the back of the hangar was where the office space was, in like most of these Quonset Sut hangars. And you had Marine guards with machine guns at the top watching these guys. And where the flag is, there was a big blown up picture, not as big as the flag. And it wasn't the picture of the president. It wasn't the picture of a general. It wasn't the picture of a Marine. It was a picture of that grizzled fireman who was coming out of the dust and human debris. The guy who, when the towers were coming down, that picture you saw printed on the front page of the magazines, with a look of determination and anger on his face that literally was enough to lift America off its knees. These kids who were fighting the Taliban, these kids who were there in the middle of a war zone, hung up the picture of a firefighter of a firefighter. And ladies and gentlemen, at that moment in 9/11, for the first time in a long time, America focused, for the first time in a long time, on what you do. America focused on the extent and the depth and the breadth and the intensity of the heroism. While everyone else was coming out of the building, you guys were in your gear going into the building. You guys were going up to the 80th and 90th floor. You guys were walking the way, knowing that there was a prospect you'd never walk back out. We lost a lot of firefighters that day, and we made a lot of commitments that day. Commitments that we would never, ever again put the fire service in a position they didn't have every single thing they needed to protect their fellow citizens. And we made all kinds of commitments. Chris Dodd and I did the Fire Act, and we did all these proposals that relate to demonstrating the needs that you have. By the way, if you notice, the recent study coming out, pointing out that the main reason why firefighters die on the job is because there's not enough firefighters. Because there's not enough firefighters. That's not Joe Biden. That's independent studies. So when these guys tell you that when we're trying to appropriate more money for additional firefighters, don't tell them this has anything to do with, like they like to make it sound like, you know, we're sort of carpetbagging here. They were just trying to beef up our firehouses. It's for a simple reason. There is a critical mass you need in order to be able to protect one another. Not just protect the property or the people you're going to save, but protect one another. And we've broken that commitment. We've broken that commitment. And I view it as a sacred commitment. I've done the same thing with police. The Biden crime bill put over 100,000 cops on the street. And all of a sudden we find out the administration comes along and they say, no, we don't need it anymore. They acknowledge when they eliminate the program that, quote, it worked marvelously. But they eliminated it. It used to be, the beginning of the administration, we sent from the federal government to the state $2.1 billion a year. Why? To protect and serve the people of your community. Now that's down to less than $60 million in some places. So folks, I know John McCain's my friend, and he genuinely is my friend. We have been friends for 33 years. Jill and I know him intimately. We know his background. We've traveled the world with him. He was actually technically assigned to me. He was a Navy liaison working in the United States Senate. I was the chairman of the committee that had to do with the Soviet Union and Europe. We literally have traveled the world together. He has been the staff guy. He used to kid and say I made him carry his bags. He never carried my bags. He was supposed to carry my bags. He never carried my bags. He never carried nor should he have. But here's the point. Here's the point. He's a good guy. He's a genuinely good guy and a genuinely close friend. When John McCain was being ripped apart by George Bush's machine in 2000 in that primary in South Carolina, and they were going after John McCain's beautiful daughters, and they were going after John McCain's wife with scurrilous accusations. I literally, in the middle of that campaign, as a supporter of Al Gore, picked up the phone and I called John. I said, John, where do you want me? Where do you publicly want me to come and stand with you? Stand with you and point out the lies that, in fact, the Bush administration is trying to drop, the Bush campaign is dropping on you. So this guy genuinely is my friend. But we have a genuine, fundamental disagreement, Barack and I and he and Sarah Palin, on some of the things we're talking about today. And let me explain to you why it is, because people can't understand. I don't know a single person that is braver. I don't know a single person with more physical courage than my friend John McCain. I don't know one. I've never met one. Never met one. But ladies and gentlemen, there's a fundamental philosophy John has, and I assume Governor Palin does. I'm not being a wise guy. I don't know. I'm assuming she agrees with his position. No, I'm not. I'm being deadly earnest. I don't know. I don't know. But here's what it is. I'm sure John wants to protect firefighters. I'm sure John cares about the physical safety of our communities. I'm sure John cares about our international security and safety. Tonight we're going to hear a debate on American foreign policy. We're going to hear a debate on our national security. We're going to hear it from Mississippi. But I want to tell you, give you a little preview. The fundamental difference between John and Barack and me and John is this. If you're talking about security, it starts at home in addition to protecting our troops abroad and giving them all they need. Well, let's just talk about home for a minute, Homeland Security, 9/11. Ladies and gentlemen, on 9/11, if you notice, it was not some brave Special Forces soldier or a military guy like my kid or somebody else who was responding to what was a foreign policy, national security, international attack. It was you. It was you. It was also the local law enforcement, the local cops. You were the ones who were on the ground. You were the ones that gave your lives. You were the ones that had the responsibility. And then the 9/11 Commission came along, a bipartisan commission made up of very conservative as well as liberal senior people in our government and out of our government. And they made a series of recommendations. And they recommended that we should spend a great deal more money than we're spending to make sure that the cargo ships that come ashore off Lake Michigan, that in fact are dropped on your ports, do not carry a dirty bomb or do not carry a homemade nuclear weapon. They said they want to make sure that we only inspect 1% of those. What do you think happens if any of the cargo containers coming ashore have a dirty bomb, meaning a radiological bomb? Who is going to be responding? Who are they going to call? It ain't going to be my son in Iraq. It's going to be you. Chemical companies where I live, along so-called Chemical Alley in New Jersey and Delaware along the river. Ladies and gentlemen, we've done virtually nothing to secure them. The 9/11 Commission made serious recommendations about the kinds of safety precautions should exist. But the opposition argued, no, it's interfering with free enterprise to demand that they have certain precautions that cost money. But who responds to a chemical attack? Is it going to be somebody that you know in the United States military? Federally? It's going to be you. And when the attack occurs, God forbid it attacks again, are you able to, on your radio equipment in this fire truck, are you able to directly talk to the National Guard? Are you able to be interoperable with every other major agency, from the United States military to the National Guard to the local police to the Pentagon? Costs money. 9/11 Commission recommended at the time it issued its report, critical that we spend the money to do that. The list goes on. Virtually none of it's been done nationally. So folks, what's the deal? Does it mean John, who voted against those things? Does it mean John, who voted against them, doesn't care about you? No. Let me tell you what it means, is because it's very important you understand it. It's about what John and the conservative right believe is the responsibility of the federal government versus local responsibility. They say, and they argue, that whether or not there is an attack, if someone were to set off a dirty bomb at the Brewers game tonight, they say that is a local problem. The local government, the mayor of Milwaukee, the local fire service, the local police. Ladies and gentlemen, to me, that is a federal responsibility. Same way with cops. Why did they get rid of the cops program? They say the ultimate local crime is getting mugged in a parking lot. That has nothing to do with the federal government. Well, guess what? When you guys are able to control the drug trade locally from Afghanistan and from Colombia and from the Andes, then maybe it should be a local problem. But where I come from, 60% of all the crime occurs in your state as well because of drugs. Tell me how much control your local police have over our international borders. So, folks, I'm sick and tired of this neoconservative malarkey that somehow the federal government doesn't have a responsibility to this local fire hall, to the local police department. Because, ladies and gentlemen, you're not the ones who can control the policy relating to whether or not there's another terrorist attack, but you're the ones who are going to have to respond. If somebody puts sarin gas into the air conditioning system at the Milwaukee Bucks arena, it's not going to be some guy in special forces gear with night vision goggles going to find it. It's going to be a local policeman watching a guy jump out of a dumpster as he's patrolling the back of the facility. So, folks, I want you to understand, this debate is a big deal debate. It's about a philosophy. It's not about who cares about you. That's how some Democrats and Republicans want to make it. We care more about you than they care about you. I am absolutely convinced John McCain wants to do away with crime. I'm absolutely convinced John McCain would put his body between you and a terrorist. I'm absolutely convinced John McCain feels as deeply as I do about protecting the homeland. But let's get the facts straight so you don't misunderstand anything. He votes against funding it. He votes against giving you the money. He votes against, and the President of the United States will not give you the money. Because philosophically, he doesn't think it's a responsibility of the federal government. It is a local responsibility. Talked about Amtrak, and I'll stop. I ride home every single night. I do a 250-mile-a-day commute. I leave my house in the 103, they call it, the 101 sometimes, that leaves at 7:32. I usually take a 7 o'clock train. If I'm lucky, it gets home, and I get home at 9 o'clock. If you got to commute 250 miles a day, it's the easiest commute you can have. But it's 4 hours a day. And ladies and gentlemen, come with me next time and get on a train as you come out of Washington State, the train station in Washington, single most visited facility in all of Washington. And stand in the back if you're not on an Acela and look out the window and you tell me how many cops you see. You see how many people you see in the switching yard, how many cameras you see. When yet we've been told by the CIA any major attack is likely to come on rail. You go through the Baltimore Tunnel, built in 1869. Virtually no lighting, no cameras, no security. Why? They argue it's a local responsibility. It's a local responsibility. So, ladies and gentlemen, when you hear this foreign policy debate tonight between Barack Obama and John, think beyond whether or not John was a hero, because he was and is. We need more than a good soldier. We need a wise leader. We need a wise leader to head this country. And so, look, I give you my word as a Biden. I give you my word that I can speak directly for Barack Obama, because the condition on which I accept, I shouldn't say condition, it sounds the wrong way, but there were certain conditions I had agreeing to run as vice president. This is not a job I ever aspired to. You know the little joke? I once had two brothers. One went to sea, and one became vice president, and I never heard from either again. So, you know. But one of the things that any of you know me, and some of you firefighters do know me, my passion, not for the last year, not for the last 5 years, not for the last 20 years, but for the entirety of my career in the United States Senate has been giving firefighters and cops all they need to protect us. That is more urgently needed today because of the world we live in than it ever was before. Some of you firemen who are closer to my age, tell you, did you ever think you'd have to be learning and dealing with what you do about a dirty bomb? Did you ever think anybody would be telling your folks in a fire hall you'd have to be able to know what certain chemicals were in terms of the new toxic chemicals? Did everybody ever tell you you think you'd have to go through the kind of training you're going through now as a local fire department to deal with terrorist attacks? But the truth is you are. We owe you. We owe you. We have a sacred obligation to give anybody we send, whether they're wearing a United States military uniform, whether they're wearing fire gear or a police badge, a shield. We have a sacred obligation to give you all that is reasonably needed for you to do your job and to first and foremost protect yourself so that you can then protect us. I remind people when they say this, say, what do you mean protect yourself first? What do you do when you're flying an aircraft? What's the stewardess tell you if you have a child? Put your mask on first before you put the mask on to the child. Why? If you try to put the child's mask on, you don't get yours on, you both die. Well, if we don't protect you, if we don't give you every single solitary thing you need, guess what? You can't protect us. And I promise you, I guarantee you, in an Obama-Biden administration, firefighters and cops will be first on the list, not last on the list. Thank you all very, very much.